Okay, so I finally got myself an iPad, yeehaw. So let's do a little iPad tutorial for Garageband. Garageband and iPad, separate outs for drums, right? Here's a little one I did, separate outs. Okay, like there's one. Here's one I do in the second tutorial that follows after this, which is not a rock beat. Again, separate outs, but with a different kind of music. Check this out. There's one, let's close that. There's another one. I'm just experimenting, you see, trying to figure out different ways to do it. Here's another one I did. Again, kick is on its own out. There's the hat. There's the snare, and I'm using a couple of guitars with this. And all the time I've been messing around, I did this one as well. This one is where I was first experimenting with these separate out things. And yeah, there's the kick on it, separate out, hats. There's a secondary hat splash cymbal type thing. There's two layered snares here. One I've achieved on its own output by actually getting the snare and pasting it in on the twos and fours, because it's a heavy beat just going baff, baff up the twos and fours for the snare. That's the second and fourth beats in the pattern. That's being doubled up by the beat sequencer there, playing the snare on the 2 and 4. But then I kind of just I really got into this one, and I put a load of guitars down. I was like sort of going, yeah, what if I put another guitar? And then I put some vocals down, yeah. But listen, I just put the vocals down on this using the built-in mic on the iPad, right? And it's perfectly good to get ideas down, perfectly good. And actually, I mean, again, I haven't mixed this on speakers, so it might be a bit overloaded on speakers, but to be honest, on headphones at least, I mean, this is good enough for a demo to play people these songs and say, look, this is the songs. Do you want to be our drummer, or do you want to be our bassist, or even to give to a label? Because labels don't want massively finished songs. They don't, trust me. We'll talk about that a bit further on. Etc. Right, so look, separate outs on drums. This one we're going to be doing a heavy beat, a more rock beat, square beat, because when you're doing rock beats, or even a singer-songwriter type beat where the drum's going boom, bap, or something like that, there is an issue with the snares. We'll come to it. You'll see this, right? So look, let's do it. Separate outs for drums. So create song, and we're going to go with the drummer track, because if you're doing songwriter type songs, whether it's with acoustic guitars, or electric guitars, you probably want to use the drummer tracks. They're a lot easier to use, but you can use the beat sequencer with the acoustic kits and make up your own beats. So I'm going to go with the drummer track. We're specifically looking at separate outs here for the drummer tracks. Now they have good quality stereo sample kits, but they're in stereo, right? So let's go with the heavy rock drummer Anders, right? And there's his basic beat called Heavy Hand, and because this is the first track I've put into the arrangement, Garageband adopts the tempo to 80 beats per minute to match this heavy Anders beat, but I can change that. Let's put it up to 100 and 100. This is Anders' default beat at 100 beats per minute. So let's tweak that a bit. Let's take the fills off and let's make it a bit more simple, so it's a little bit less busy, the beat. There we go. Right, we've tweaked the beat. Back to the multi-track. When I say back to the multi-track, I'm touching this icon, the multi-track icon, every time. Boom. There's Anders beat, which we've tweaked. It's a custom beat now, as much as if we'd built it ourselves by using the pattern editor, right? And it's a stereo kit. Like on Garageband with iPad, the same as Garageband on desktop, you get stereo kits. You can only get into separate out mixing with the drums on separate channels if you go to Logic. And as you can hear, there's quite a bit of ambient room sound on that kit. But it's fine. You can still build great demos with these drummer tracks in stereo. There's nothing wrong with it, right? But separate outs. Let's do it. Let's create another track. Another drummer track. Again, go with Anders. And now this is his default pattern. Don't worry about it. We're not going to use it. Back to the multi-track. There's the new Anders track, right, with this default pattern on. Touch that pattern, delete. Then get our custom pattern from this previous Anders track. Touch it again, copy it, drag it to the start, or you can get the player to the start by touching that return to the start transport thing. Select the new Anders track and touch to the right of the playhead and paste in our custom pattern. We now have our custom pattern on both Anders tracks, and if they play together they'll slightly flange. Right? Okay, now we go to this first Anders track, double tap on the icon, which takes us back into the editor for that track. Take out everything apart from the kick, back to multi-track. Then we go to this Anders track, double tap, take out the kick, back to the multi-track. So now we've got our custom pattern played by two Anders tracks. That one plays only the kick, that plays only the hats and the snare. But it sounds identical to when one Anders track was playing that same pattern. Now at this point, that is as far as you might need to go. You just have the ability now to mix your kick drum the way you want, but your hats and snares can be EQ'd and compressed and what have you together. It's not a huge problem. But if you want to split them up further, we can't add any more drummer tracks. We're at our maximum of 2. So we need to bounce down one of these Anders tracks, and the one to bounce down is the kick. Now here's the thing. To bounce down, you just select a track, touch on its icon again and choose merge. That will merge the selected track and any other ticked tracks down to a stereo submix. When you do that, however, it creates a backup of the song in the state it is now before you do the merge. And if you haven't saved and titled the song you're working on, you'll end up, if you do a lot of this merging, you'll end up with a whole bunch of copies of a random song title, which will be called My Song with a number after it. It's a bit harder to keep track of things. So best thing to do before you start doing any merging is to save the song, give it a title. So we save with that file icon. Everything you do is being saved in the background, but this will close and finally save the song. And then we can rename it. So we touch that file icon. There's the song, My Song 5. Now we touch and hold until the menu appears. Rename. I'm going to call this Outs Rock, because this is specifically going to address an issue when you're trying to get separate outs with rock type drummer beats, right? Done. Now we can reopen it. Okay, now we're going to bounce down that Anders playing the kick. So we touch on that track header, merge. It is ticked by default to be merged, but we could tick and add any other tracks in to merge together at this point. But we're just going to merge, in other words, bounce down that Anders kick drum track to an audio file. And we just touch merge here to do it. Merge. There it is, bounce down as an audio track. And the icon is a speaker by default. So we touch on that icon, choose icons from the menu, drums, give it a kick icon so we know what it is. And there is the Anders kick bounced down to audio. and it'll sound exactly the same as the Anders kick being played from the Anders drummer track. And that is now playing with Anders doing our custom pattern of just the snare and the hats. It sounds exactly the same, right? Now we can create another drum track. New track. Anders. Don't matter about the default pattern. Boom, back to multi-track. There's Anders, the new Anders track with the default pattern on. Touch that pattern, touch again, delete it. Get our custom pattern from here, touch it, copy, play it to the start, new Anders track, touch to the right of the playhead, paste that custom pattern in. Now, here's the issue. Let's get this. Come on. Sometimes it's a bit sticky to move these tracks. Let's get that kick drum off at the top. So this is Anders with our custom pattern on both tracks, right? Playing the snare and the hat, the kick's taken out. If I double tap and go into this one and make that the snare only, take the hat out, back to multi-track, and then go into this one, double tap and make that the hi-hat only, back to the multi-track. Now we've got our custom pattern, that's just the snare, that's just the hat, and there's the bounce down kick. But there's an issue. Listen to the snare soloed. It's flamming. Now what I found is that with all rock type drummers, when they're playing a straightforward beat like boom boom da da boom da or boom boom da or boom da boom boom da boom, or any kind of sort of squarish rock beat, if you go into the editor and you take out the kick and the hi-hat or whatever other instrument is keeping time, the toms or the ride or whatever, take those out and just isolate the snare, it will do a flam. And it doesn't matter, there's no way of stopping it. So we've got to find another way of getting our Anders snare in, doing that 2s and 4s. In other words, it's a straightforward rock beat where the drummer is playing 1, 2 on the snare, 3, 4 on the snare, 2s and 4s, right? We can't bounce it down because it's got the flams in there, which are no good. Right, the hi-hat's fine. Here's the hi-hat. That's just fine. That's playing the hi-hat. Right, okay. So how are we going to do it? Well, let's make a beat sequencer track. Normally the beat sequencer is used for doing electronic drums. Now the beat sequencer works, if you don't know this way. Across the top we see the bars. That's for the multi-track section that we're working on, which by default is 8 bars long. But this beat sequencer always gives you just a 1 bar pattern. Beat 1, beat 2, beat 3 and beat 4. Down on the bottom here we can change kit, and we can actually load up any acoustic kit. Look. So we can make our own beats using the acoustic drum kits that are used by the drummers. So I'll choose the heavy kit, which is Anders kit in the rock drummers category, and as soon as I choose it, a demo pattern for that drum kit will be loaded and it will begin to play. I stop the beat sequencer using the on-off button there. This is the on-off button for only the beat sequencer, right? And then close this with done. Now we want to get rid of that demo pattern, so we choose the pattern selector here in factory, because you can save your own patterns. In factory we choose far left new pattern. Now we have an empty pattern. Turn that off. Done. Right? Now, next thing, we want to get the right snare. The second row here is the snare. If we touch on any of these drum icons, like I'm going to touch now on this snare icon, we see kit pieces and it's set to snare. If we touch where it says snare, there's all the possible kit pieces we can put into that row for the Anders heavy kit, and we can play these by touching the play icon. That's the current snare. That's the ride bell, pedal hat, crash, tom mid, kick 2, and there's the snare that we want, the rim shot snare, which is louder, so choose that. Now I can put my rim shot snare in on the 2s and the 4s of 1 bar in this beat sequencer. Now go to velocity, touch and hold on that note and bring the velocity right up. We want a really nice loud cracking heavy snare. Same with that one. Right, there you go. Now we've got to record this basic 1 bar pattern onto the beat sequencer track on the multi-track. So I'm going to hit record and do that, and I'm just going to let it record for 1 bar. I only need 1 bar of it. Here we go. Done, and it's recorded 1 bar. You can see there in green out of the whole 8 bar section. Back to multi-track, and there is our snare recorded from the beat sequencer doing 2s and 4s with the Anders rim shot snare. And if we now put that in with the other drums, but not the Anders flamming snare coming from the Anders kit, we got the kick, hi-hats and the snare. Here we go. Bing bang bong. There's our pattern. Now if we don't want this snare to do anything else, we don't want it to do any little offbeat licks or fills, we can just loop it all the way to the end of the section. Touch on the pattern, touch again, loop, and it extends it all the way across the 8 bar section. There's our pattern now. Kick drum merged or bounced down to audio. Hi-hats coming from the Anders drummer track with the kick and the snare turned off, and there's the snare drum coming from the beat sequencer. Right, let's make that into a snare icon actually. Drums, snare, and let's make that a hat icon. Drums, hat. Right, there we go. Let's hear it. Right, and now you can mix it. This track we don't need anymore. We can get rid of that Anders track. Right, if you want, just delete. Right now, but if you want this snare, we started out. Let me just remove those loops. Drag it back. The looping. There's the basic snare pattern we put in doing the 2 and the 4. But if you want it to do some fills or little offbeats further down, then it's no good looping it, because looping it to the end of the section means that the pattern that we start with, that the loops are coming off, doing just the 2 and the 4, will just be repeated every bar. If we want to put variations in, we need to copy and paste the patterns in as real patterns. Then in any bar we can choose a pattern and put in extra snare licks. So touch on that 1 bar pattern, copy, play it to the start of the next bar, touch to the right of the playhead, paste, play it forwards to the start of the next bar, touch to the right of the playhead, paste, touch to the right of the playhead, paste, etc. And do that all the way down. And we're now pasting in that 2/4 snare pattern, individual patterns for each bar of the 8 bar section, which means now I can go to bar 4 here, touch that, edit, takes me into piano edit, and there's bar 4. Now on bar 4 here, if I bring in the pencil, I can put a little extra snare beat at the end of that bar where it leads into the next half of the verse. You know, this is the first 4 bars, that's the end of the first 4 bars, like this. Yeah, or pinch and zoom in a bit more so we see, and put in 2 for a little da-da at the end, like that, like this, right? Yeah, or I could put an offbeat snare in. Let's move this one somewhere there, maybe. Let's take that one out. Let's just hear that. Is it there? Yeah, a little offbeat snare like that. So let's leave that in, but turn the pencil off, touch on that note, velocity, and just lower its velocity a bit. Then we'll go all the way down to the very last pattern, bring in the pencil, zoom in a bit, and we'll just put in 2 snare notes at the end there, and then 1, is it there? Let's hear that. Yeah, like that. There's a fill at the end, right? That's it. Right, done. There's our snare. Now we can mix on separate outs. Let's put little guitar riff in there, heavy guitar riff. Guitars in the genre of rock blues. And there's a heavy lick here somewhere. Where is it? So. Yeah, let's have that. Just so we've got something else for what I'm going to show in a bit. So look, there it is with the riff, guitar riff, and the drums are on separate outs. Okay, there you go. Now we can start to mix. Let me mute the guitar for this. Bring in the mix controls. That's the 3 little faders there. Right, kick drum. Solo it. Let's listen. Remember, this is bounced down to audio. So I can do basic stuff here. I can just turn up the amount of compression. That just raises the threshold. Adjust my basic up, high shelf and low shelf, treble and bass. But I'm going to the mix details for any selected track by touching plugins and EQ. Let's do that. Okay, there's the kick. Let's go into the visual EQ. I just touch on that little visual EQ icon. It opens and switches it on. Let's give it some bottom end. Just scoop those mids out and the low mids a bit and give it a bit of click at the top. Done. Then we'll give it some compression. Here we go. There you go. I'll lower it down a bit. Right. Snare next. Snare next. We're just going to make the snare more trebly up in that bite region area around sort of 4K-ish. And some shelf above that to bring out the fizz. So we're just going to make it a bit more sort of edgy and attacking. Let's give it some compression. Not too much. Let's hear it with the kick. And there's a hi-hats, which I'm not going to do anything with. Right? And there it is. We're not using this track. That's the original Anders kit with the flamming snare on, right? Which we can't use. So there you go. You could just mix it to your heart's content. Bring the heavy riff back in. Right, bing, bang, bong. Now, here's the thing though. Let's take the guitar out. Have a listen to the kick. This is just a little extra. Have a listen to the kick soloed. Now, all these drum kits have an ambient room sound on them. You can hear it in the decay of the kicks, like a sort of room sound. Once you've got something like a guitar in the mix, you don't really hear it that much. But you can further remove that and make the drums even more sort of staccato by using a noise gate. Now on anything that's been bounced to audio we can do this. There's the kick, it's been bounced to audio. There's the noise gate, bring it in. And as I raise the threshold you hear it starting to sound gated. Right, sounds a bit unnatural. Bring it back in the mix, it doesn't sound that bad because the other instruments and things like guitars and that mask that gating sound, right? Right? Now if I want to do that same gating effect on the snare, because here's the snare, let's hear it. Again, you can hear that ambient room sound on the snare, right? Right, we can't gate the snare while it's on this beat sequencer track because it's a drum machine. And Garageband thinks, well, it's a drum machine. You won't need a noise gate. You can only get the noise gate on, unless you use a third-party plugin. I haven't bothered downloading any. You could do it then, yeah. But you can only use a noise gate with the stock plugins on an audio track. So if we want to noise gate that snare, we need to bounce it down to audio as well. So before we do that, let's make a copy of this beat sequencer version. So I touch on it, on that icon at the header of that beat sequencer track, and do duplicate. That is going to duplicate the beat sequencer track with the same Anders kit in it, with the snare that I selected on the second row, etc. Then I touch on the background and that appears. Lasso all those drum parts with them all highlighted. Touch on any one, touch again, copy the whole lot, play it to the start, choose the second beat sequencer track with the Anders kit, the heavy kit, touch to the right of the playhead and paste those patterns in. Now I've got a backup in case I need to go back. I will mute that. And it sounds identical. There's the original. And here's the copy. Right, so let's mute that one. And then this original one, we'll bounce it, we'll merge it. Touch on the header, merge, merge. Now we've got our snare as audio. It puts it down the bottom. Touch on that icon with the speaker, icons, drums, snare. Right, now let's drag that up next to the other snare. So there's the Anders snare from the beat sequencer bounced down to audio there, right? It sounds the same. Here we go. Right. So now I can go back to the mix controls, plugins and EQs, and we're not using that one anymore, right? And I can now noise gate this snare. Let's hear it. Again, you'll hear that ambient sound. But I'll bring in the noise gate and do that same gating thing I did on the kick. Bring in some compression. Now it sounds really unnatural, but once we put it into the mix, here we go. You don't hear it, and it just tightens that snare up to make it even sort of super tight. Let's see if we can get it even. I mean, this might be going way over the top because we might not hear it at all if I raise that noise gate any further, but here we go. Come on. That's really short. That's really short. Let's bring it back into the mix. But it doesn't sound unnatural in the mix, does it? Yeah, it's just tightening that snare up. I'll add some nice warm low mid to it up there around 260 hertz. Give it a lovely warm woody bottom end. There you go. Separate outs, right? Again, I'm not mixing on speakers, so this might sound a bit overloaded, a bit heavy and pumpy. I'm just listening on the headphones. But I mean, you know, that's how you get separate outs. And specifically where we're dealing with rock type drum beats, this is the solution to fix that flam issue. When you use multiple drummer tracks, and you've already bounced down the kick, then you have two drummer tracks. One should play the snare, one should play the hi-hat or the ride, whatever's keeping time. As soon as you isolate the snare, it starts flamming. That happens with the rock drummers playing the rock type beats. But if you watch the next video where I do a funky, soul-y, R&B type beat, sort of slightly neo soul hip hoppy cross. I don't know what it is. It's a funky beat with some 808 and other things overlaid. You'll notice with that tutorial, when I isolate the snare on its own drummer track by turning off the hi-hat and the kick, it doesn't flam. Because it's not a rock drummer, it's playing a funky beat with a little offbeat snare. It's going like that. When you get those type of drummers and you isolate the snare in the drummer editor, it doesn't flam. It only happens on these straightforward rock beats, right? But that's the solution to fix it. Alright? So there you go. Separate outs for drum mixing on Garageband for iPad. Hope that's useful. And you might watch the next one where I show you a different type of drummer, a funky drummer doing a beat, as I said, a sort of R&B, hip-hoppy type beat. And it's a different procedure. You don't need to bounce the snare down. You might find it interesting. It'll teach you more about it. Alright, see you for the next one. Bye.